different guises: social worker, Zen priest, social activist, and we can just make a long list. Today she's teacher, and that's a really important role for someone with Dharma transmission. So I know her subject is going to be of interest to us. It's finding home in the vows. And I think that immediately raises wonderful thoughts and questions. So,
thank you. Good morning.
good morning.
I've been working with this topic for several months, and I've started giving talks about it recently. And also recently, my first teacher's book appeared. I got hold of it and am dazzled. It's not his first book, Dinan Katagiri, the founder of Minnesota Zen Center. And so I'm going to start by reading some things he said.
Sorry, which book is this?
It's called The Life That Shines Through Infinity. So, a section called The Purpose of Spiritual Practice. If you read Buddhist scriptures, they seem to say that the purpose of spiritual practice is to turn delusion into enlightenment, or guide ordinary people to become Buddhas or holy beings. So maybe we think we can reach nirvana by removing delusion, or attain wisdom and compassion by eliminating ego, or become a Buddha by sitting zazen, chanting, or whatever practice you do. But practically speaking, it's very difficult to remove human ego, desires, and delusions. So we have to think carefully about Buddhist teachings and understand more deeply what they are saying. Shakyamuni Buddha taught that a magnificent event is unfolding in every aspect of everyday life. Vivid living energy is constantly at work, creating and supporting your life. It is just like a fire that is eternal and boundless. Whoever you are, your life is very precious because the original energy of life is working in your life. To take care of your life is to burn the flame of your life force in everything you do. In every realm there is a way to touch eternity. That is spiritual practice. Doing something as spiritual practice is to invoke the life force energy deep in your own life and use it to grow your life. Growth gives you room to cultivate wisdom and compassion, love and generosity, enough to create a wonderful world for you and all beings. We study and practice Buddhist teachings in order to go deep into our own life. There you discover your original place, the place where all beings live together in peace, before we exist as individual beings. From that place you can join the flow of life, living in harmony with all beings and walking together hand in hand. Then I want to add the quote from Buddha on his deathbed, speaking to Ananda. He said, "Make the Dharma your light. Rely upon it. Do not depend upon any other thing. Make of yourself a light. Rely upon it. Do not depend on anyone else." And this is, I think, how we differ from other religions. It's not about something that will happen in the future, nor is it about relying on someone else. My teacher who ordained me and trained me, Shohaku Okamura, spoke about living by vow. In fact, he has a book by that title, in which it's an introduction to the Zen practice of Buddhism. But living by vow is also one of the names of the Minnesota Zen Center, Ganshoji. Katagiri Roshi said, living in vow. Okamura Roshi says, living by vow. And one could say living by vow, not by karma. So, anybody not have a sense for karma? Thank you.
Yes.
You don't want to have to explain.
Yes, right.
So I'm going for one-liner. I have an outline, not a text. So when you act with intention, you create karma, which then influences your life. It has fruits, and those fruits ripen sometime in this life or in a future life, and they influence what happens to you. But karma is only created when you think you exist. Meaning, when you think you exist as a separate, independent self, which is what most of us think most of the time. In my first practice period at Tassajara, the teacher was trying to get us to believe, to see that we all thought we had separate selves because we were Buddhists and we knew that we didn't. And he just pushed at us for weeks, trying to get somebody to show something that looked like a belief in a separate self. And, he finally got it. In fact, I was one of the people who popped out with it. But somebody else, a Catholic monk, who had jumped into Buddhism, made this beautiful, magnificent statement of who he was. And somebody said, "Is that it?" And Reb said, "That's it. That's the separate self idea." And we have that. Mine is, I'm a Zen person and a Zen teacher and an activist. There are all these things. These things are about as substantial as the air. And yet we live with them. And so the place where vow happens, is in the world where we imagine that we have a separate self. Vow gives us a different way to relate to the world around us. A teacher that I knew and haven't seen for years said, "You can stand on your vow." Now, so the first thing that I heard when I encountered Zen, or the first thing that attracted me, was the 4 vows. Excuse me. The 4 vows are: beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to master them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to attain it. I made a few copies. I made 10 copies. So, just because I thought most of you have not memorized these and chanted them for years. So, the 4 vows, they teach us how to relate to other beings, which is living beings. So it's not only humans, it's how I relate to anybody. Well, sometimes they say sentient, anything that's conscious. Now, there have been lots of scientific studies recently in which people learn what our ancestors all knew. Animals have consciousness, trees have consciousness, fungi have consciousness, soils have consciousness. there's not much around here that's not conscious. And so this first line, I vow to free them, teaches us how to relate to every other being. And the first vow is the one I'm really going to talk about. Desires or delusions. When I first chanted the vows, it was desires, but delusions is a better word. And it's like, I don't want to be deluded. I want to be, awake and aware of the way things really are. And the last two kind of describe practice. Is there a Dharma gate? Let me enter it. I know somebody who was a Zen priest who thought that meant he needed to take Theravadan vows so he could have 250 precepts. But he didn't want to stop being a Zen person, and I don't think he ever succeeded. It's like, I think he's teaching Zen now. And the Buddha way is unsurpassable. And I read the classic, I vow to attain it, but I also vow to embody it or to realize it or to become it. It's like becoming the Buddha way. That's what life is really about, isn't it? Wow, what's the Buddha way? Okay, I'm not going to go there right now. And then there's something called a personal vow. Now, the famous personal vow is Bernie Glassman, who vowed to end homelessness, knowing that it couldn't be done, but that's the vow. So a couple years ago, my teacher asked us all to write an essay on the vow. It's an anniversary book for San Shinji. And he wrote a long and beautiful essay about vows, including discussion of not only his personal vow, but several ancestors' personal vows. And then we had to write something, those of us who took it up, which was most of us. And the personal vow that I'm aware of is the vow to stop climate change, which I can't say it took me. I say it happened to me. I can't say I took that vow. That vow happened to me sometime more than 10 years ago now, and I didn't know what it meant, but it was like once I understood the situation, I was like, I can't just let this be. And so I'm kind of tormented in a way. It's like climate change is happening and probably is going to kill us all. And I'm in like 3 Facebook groups of people who are operating from that assumption and talking about, what do we do? And I'm in the group that says, well, we don't know anything until we really know it. And so I'm going, all right, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. So what is still possible? What is not known? And my particular vow has to do with the consciousness of the society. Our society is dedicated to greed, hate, and delusion. This has become really, really obvious. And the things that can't be challenged, for instance, capitalism can't be challenged. Well, so survival versus greed. Culturally, we're choosing greed. And so I keep puzzling about what to do about it. Does somebody have a sheet of paper with poems on it? Yes. Thank you. Oops, that's not
it's
it.
Something that wasn't the intended handout, but
Right.
I didn't
Okay.
read it.
No, that one? Bad planning. Okay. Or bad implementation. So I was going to read, the thing about vow, is personal vow, is sometimes it can be really hard to know what it is. I've spent much of my life wondering what I was going to do when I grew up. Now, I didn't start that way, but somewhere in my 30s, after dumping the previous plans, I was just waiting to find out. And then when I went for priest training, I thought that it would become clear while I was there. I had that much. I wanted to teach. And I wanted to understand everything. I had that for a long time. But I didn't know that understanding everything was going to mean practicing Buddhism. And I could have saved a lot of time if I could have seen that early. So the poem that I wanted to read here was, do not try to save the world or to do anything large, blah, 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 blah. Just wait.
Who's it by?
Oh, that's on the page too.
We could look it up.
Well,
Yeah.
I can find it somewhere.
Oh, all right.
Until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands. That's the important line. The song that is your life. It's not Mary Oliver, no. It's someone I never heard of. You know, I'm good at finding things, but sometimes I'm not good at writing notes. Oh. So, the thing is, somebody who was 10 or 15 or 20 years old decided who we were going to be. And we set off on a career path or some kind of life path. And then here we are, dealing with the results of that, and hopefully, if we're paying attention, like maybe we actually happen to stumble into Buddhism somewhere along the way, and we learn how to pay attention instead of how to be numb all the time. And then we're paying attention, and we start to see, oh, this is the way I'm going. This is what I like. This is where my body relaxes, and this is where I sleep soundly. If I'm acting this way, if I'm following this course, and to sleep soundly, to have your body have that feeling of aliveness, that's what finding your personal vow is about. So you find it, you figure out, well, you don't figure out probably. Sometimes there's cognitive energy involved, and often there's not. But you find that direction, and you go, oh, this is my vow, and you recognize it, and you accept it. And then you start to do it. And the doing of it is sort of interesting. A long time ago, when I was asking priests what it meant to be priests, they gave really interesting answers. Oh, Joanne Snyder said, it means that you humiliate yourself again and again. And I'm still curious what she had in mind. She is also the one who told me that it's very common for somebody in this path to have a period of sickness. She herself had chronic fatigue at a certain point. I don't know if she recovered. She recovered well enough to go on and live her life and teach and lead and all these things. And I had a couple of years where I was never bedridden. Some people are. But I got environmental illness and I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And I couldn't go to the Zen Center. And I credit John Kabat-Zinn for like a 95% healing of that problem. And there's a story, but I don't have to tell it. Because the thing is, I have finally a little experience of actually following my personal vow. And this happens, I was just proceeding through my priest training, and the last part of it was to do 2 monastic training periods of 3 months each, and I went to Tassajara to do them. And the summer before had been kind of a summer of freedom, and one of the things I did with that was go to Washington, D.C. with 350.org and get arrested in front of the White House. And I stayed for about a week, and I heard lots of speakers, and so I had a lot of stuff coming into me about that pipeline and about the tar sands. And so I went to Tassajara, and I sat down in the Zendo, and within the first week, I was sitting facing the wall, and there were pictures on the wall. And in these pictures, I don't think they were literal pictures, but they were pretty real. I was walking with a group of people along the pipeline. And, so stuff comes up and you let go of it. So I kept trying to let go of these pictures, and they kept coming back. Okay, it looks like walking along the pipeline. Maybe I'm supposed to do this. And so then I went to see the teacher who was there, and I talked with a couple of practice leaders. But, the teacher, Steve Stuckey, who died later in the same year of the walk. He said to me, I think it's a good idea. I think you should do it. And then he said, I'll come. Wow! And then I went off to be with my mother while she died. And Steve allowed me to call him. And so I was talking to him while sitting with my mother and sewing my brown robe. The brown robe means Dharma transmission. And you have to sew them yourself, saying chants and things. So then I was back in the monastery. Certainly while I was with my mother, I wasn't going to do practical things like accessing the internet or anything. So while I was in the monastery doing, a lot of sitting and my work assignment and classes and all this stuff, I was also trying to figure out what this walk was and what its name was. And finally the name Compassionate Earth Walk appeared, and that felt right. I mean, this is how it goes, and surely it's like you have an idea, but then you have to see if it fits. And so I was coming up with dozens of ideas. And that one fit because we were honoring the compassion of the earth. And when I left the monastery and got back home, I spent a lot of months doing preparations, being online, communicating with people, and also finished sewing my robes, went to Japan for Dharma transmission, or went first to my teacher and then to Japan, and all these other other activities relating to my Buddhist practice. What my teacher said when I asked him was about leading the walk. He said, wait till after transmission. And that seems obvious, but it hadn't been obvious before. It's funny, ceremonies are funny. They actually do things to you. So first ordination and then transmission both put me into a place where it's like, okay, I'm going this way. And since transmission, I've been able to see more clearly. And so, this is perhaps a warning. When you actually see what your personal vow is, and you start to do it, everything kicks up in your face. I remember a person, 5 weeks into the walk, but he'd only been on the walk for a couple weeks. He said, I've never seen you when you're not angry. I've never seen you when you're not angry. Well, I mean, we had things happening like there are 4 people sitting by the riverbank, and Heron decides to do a dive over their heads into the river. That kind of stuff. It was like somehow I wound up with a really difficult group, and I can look back and see what my mistakes were, and people warned me and I still couldn't do it. Everything you do wrong, every flaw in your character is going to appear. And so I think that's just part of the deal. You are going to see what a screwed up mess you are. And you're also going to see some things. One of the things that I noticed on the walk was that I absolutely could not do it. I had to do it. There were times, I mean, we had disputes. We had, I apparently am not a good manager. And so I remember there were times, and I think I might have said to people, I cannot, even if I'm the only one, I have to finish this. And so I did. Oh. The other poem is here. I put it into the thing. So it's titled "The Gods Will Come," and it's anonymous. And it says, "Go ahead, light your candles, burn your incense, ring your bells, and call out to the gods, but watch out, because the gods will come. And they will put you on the anvil and fire up the forge and beat you until they turn brass into pure gold." I posted that on my blog. It resulted in a lot of interest and a reunion with an old friend that I hadn't seen in 5 years. And it's like, yeah. It's like using the language of the gods is one thing. It's like, okay. It's like in Buddhism, it's like the entire earth is here to create us. And the entire is here to create us. Well, that's putting it backwards, isn't it? But anyway, the entire earth does create us. And we create it. The contributions go both ways. And so, when I ask the earth to support me, and when I ask the hillside to help me, and when I ask, there's some particular rock characters in the Black Hills. I heard their names, but I didn't write them down. When I ask them to help me, they actually show up. One time, I went to the Sakya Women's Buddhist Conference in Hong Kong, And somebody there were three of us, and we went up this path, mountain is too strong a word, but she took us to a place where there was a Buddha carving, an Amitabha, in cement, and it felt really old, and people would come by and, bow to it or whatever, and we spent an hour there sitting, lots of pictures, but we sat there, and then we went on, and then they went back down the hill, and I came back, because my business about, asking for help from things, I don't usually do it in public. It's like if I had people who wanted to do it with me, that would be good. But, so I decided to see, and I did succeed in finding Amitabha again. But before I reached Amitabha, I found the dragon and the phoenix. So I did what I do, and I said hello. And they said a few things, and then I said, will you help me? And it was the dragon, the phoenix. Everybody else said, sure, we'll help you. And then I say, what do you have to offer, and what can I give to you? And there are interesting conversations there too. But the dragon and the phoenix just laughed at me. They said, you're nothing. We've been doing this dance forever. We don't need you. And of course, the project I was asking help from was about, climate change and the destruction of the world as we know it. So I was puzzled. I felt something I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. And I went home and I got shingles, and I was sick for a month. And since then, it's still been like, well, what am I doing? I don't think, it's like, with a vow, you can get the mistake, the confusion that you're actually doing something. And people have asked, you think you can stop climate change? Oh, don't be silly. But I can't not make the effort. And so I mean, the rational thought in this process was, well, there's all this technology and there's all these things. There's a bunch of things. The technology is really dangerous, You don't know. We know what happens when we introduce a species to stop an invasive species. Then we have two invasive species, They worked really hard to bring reed canary grass over here and kudzu. They did. It's like, you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. So I thought that perhaps throwing ourselves on the mercy of the universe would be a plan. And then sometimes I feel like a street corner preacher. Because all I'm proposing is Buddhism. All I'm proposing is that we just recognize ourselves as being one of the sentient beings in the universe rather than the lords of the universe. And that seems pretty heretical in today's culture. I know there are cultures where it's not heretical. There was a little incident at the farm back when I had money and I was hiring people to help me in the orchard. I have more money now, but anyway, it was before I used it up and went back to work. And I was pulling up weeds. I wish I had written down the name of them, but anyway. And so Justin across the way says, they're really strong over here, the ones I was pulling up over here. And then he says, they communicate with each other. Justin Rowland is a very traditional Lakota, grew up without electricity, and I'm probably the only person who said, wow, cool. And his family took care, probably still takes care of the Wounded Knee site. and he's amazingly creative, and somehow he spent a while living in Faribault and made money by working on my farm for a little bit. And he said that, and I thought, it completely changed the ball game. If I pull things up over here, and they grow up stronger over there, which we understand human beings do that. You know, you attack somebody, they strengthen themselves somewhere else. Then attacking is never going to be a good plan. And so my day-to-day life at the farm, to the extent that I do any farming, is trying to come to terms directly and intimately with what it means to not control the world around me. So I get to watch myself a lot. I get the mind of killing, the need to control, all these things are so present. And all I can say is I'm developing a little patience with that mind. And I'm making an effort to study with people who know another way to be. And that does, to some extent, include my Zen teachers and other Buddhist teachers. And it also includes people from traditional indigenous cultures who actually have in their bones a way of living with the world that does not include control, that actually experience themselves as just one speck in the whole picture. And it feels like it'll take forever to learn this. It feels like the world will end before I learn it. But there's no option. I had thought, I'll maybe say, thing about personal calling. Oh, there it is, calling. See, I grew up a Lutheran, and there were callings.
That's the term.
Yep, right, yeah. So our term is vow, and personal vow. And so, for some people, it's actually to be monastic. And people who have taken that up come and speak here sometimes, and we can all feel the power of what it does to actually turn inward in that complete and total way. There are all kinds of devotional practice, which I don't think Vipassana is so strong on. But I just wrote down the ones that I know and do. Bowing. Bowing is an amazing thing. It puts you in your place. The pose of the child is, in my mind, the aim of the vow, the bow. And then you stand up again. Chanting. There are a lot of chants in various parts of Buddhism that are said to have effects. And so, if you have somebody who's sick, you might chant the Enmejuku Kanen Gyo, which I won't unless someone asks me. And the expectation is that it may help them. Now, I don't know anybody who actually believes that it might help them. And then you can also chant the Daihi Shindarani, and it helps with all kinds of things, except does it? So in the last several months, I've started thinking, what if these chants, which are all sacred syllables, they're not, they translate them to English sometimes, but it's chants in Sanskrit or Pali or Sino-Japanese or whatever, that are said to have magical powers. What if this is a way of speaking in the language of some a way of relating to the energy structures of the universe? And so my chanting has changed. The words haven't changed, but the feeling of what I'm doing has changed. Other kinds of devotion include memorizing, studying, copying texts. And I would say other forms of devotion could also include service to humans, taking care of refugees, feeding homeless people, taking care of plants. I practice devotion mostly with the plants on the farm. But I also do services. And I try to maintain a connection with my lineage and with the natural world and with the human world. And so, of course, I completely fail because it's too big, but that's what a vow is it's too big. And then I said something in the world, some action in the world. There was a time when I really, really wanted to be a psychotherapist. It was like that was going to be how I manifested my gifts to the world. And so I got the training and I did it some, and various things happened. I've never been good at getting jobs. That's one of the things that's happened. And then I changed, and then I came back, spent my retirement money, and so I'm a psychotherapist again, and I can see how wonderful it is, but it's not my vow anymore. My vow is this other thing. But I don't know that there's any kind of work that could actually not be someone's vow. That could not be the vehicle for manifesting yourself, your own flower, your own gift to the world. So, I think I will stop and invite questions or comments.
I always worry about making these big ass vows that I can't make, I can't do. Like saving the world or saving the environment. You do little things, you try not to use plastic, those little things. But I've gotten to the point where if I can make the vow of leaving that door and the first person I see that it wasn't in this room and smile at them, that's my vow. Because I know that the energy behind the vow comes from my heart, not from my head. And that's where I feel like maybe that's the biggest thing I can do, but I'm not going to change the world. And I don't have that intention of changing the world. I'm discovering myself as I grow and learn and hopefully become wiser. But the big vows is like, Oprah Winfrey giving $10 million to the school in Africa to help all those. And you see that all in the media everywhere, but if you try to, I have a tendency to compare myself with the big vows, and I can't do the big vows. I can only do my vow, or my little thing.
So, on the one hand, I thank you for bringing up the little thing. But I have to disagree with you. I mean, I don't think a multimillionaire giving $10 million is a vow. And I wonder what she would say her vow was if you asked her. That's probably related to it in some way. But she's interacting with the culture. She's got a position of power. She's affecting the culture in some way that probably she means to be beneficial.
Empowering women, girls.
Yeah, okay. So that's the thing. I see a lot of people around who that's their thing. I see a lot of people. I mean, people have so many details. But the thought that I can't change the world, I want to challenge that, because we all create the world. If you said, I can't single-handedly change the world, I would be absolutely in agreement. Okay, I will not quote Margaret Mead, but half of you will know the quote. So when I see powerlessness and helplessness, so what I want to challenge is not powerlessness but helplessness. We feel like there's nothing we can do about this situation, and yet most of us are among the most privileged people on the planet. So I'm a woman, I'm a lesbian, I'm sick, I'm old, I look funny. And yet, I can travel, I don't expect to get mugged, I don't expect to get robbed, I don't expect the police to shoot me. In fact, I'm pretty sure if they confronted me, we'd come out of it just fine. And I can go to the airport, which I'm sorry I've started doing again. And I usually get a pre-check, but if I don't, I have a pleasant conversation while they pat me down because I refuse the machines. You know, that's huge privilege to be allowed by the authorities in power. And I know that I could lose that privilege by certain kind of political actions. And still, I would have the privilege of the white skin and being American, the American passport and so forth. And I have class privilege, you know. I may be close to broke, but I'm not anywhere near the other people at my income bracket, you know, because, you know, I bought the farm with family money. So we have privilege. And privilege is not something to feel bad about. It's something to use. And how does that feel?
It feels good. But I'm so busy discovering my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what my practice is. You know, really, 99% of it is, you know, who am I? Why do I think this way? What do I believe in? What's important to me? What am I going to do to stay open, to keep my heart open and not close off from, you know, the learned behaviors I've had. And that's where most of my energy seems to go. So I don't know about everybody else.
Yeah, and so I hope some more people will say, I'll say, when I said there's in the world and then there's monastic, there's internal work, which is of value. And I will add that people who really go into that, you know, like, I heard a story of some meditation teacher sometime who heard that there was likely to be an earthquake, and he went and sat on the fault line and meditated. I knew a woman who led rituals, and she would choose where she led them. The one that I was at was near a nuclear power plant. And that's why I say, don't underestimate the power of that, the inner work.
I'm curious where, because given that inner work and watching things rise, and it's where vow and volitional formation come together. And if you could talk about that. I mean, does the vow emerge for you from the volition, or does it emerge before the volition? And why I raise that is that it's the things you're saying to me about consciousness precede volition. They rise, and before volition and my putting an imprint on, sort of a made by me kind of label on things, but it's all before that. So I'm wondering where the vow begins to emerge.
That's a good question. I think you a philosopher?
I've tempered.
Okay, so you used some language that might have a special meaning that I don't know. Let me say a couple of things. No, 3 things that I know about my personal life and vow, because I have not done a lot of work with other people about their vows. So what I know is that sometime in high school, I was applying for a summer program, and it was in science. And high school, it was at a college, and they asked me what my intention was, and I said, I want to understand everything in the universe, and I want it to be useful. So I thought I was going into physics, and I wanted to discover, invent, or whatever, the unified field theory. This did not work. But I remembered saying that, and years later, when I found myself in Zen, which was sort of a happy accident, I went, oh, that was a seed of what's now. The other thing about Zen, the second piece, is that it was the 4 vows that attracted me to Zen. It took me a few years to understand what the refuges were about, and I'm really glad I took the trouble. But it was like I said, oh, free all beings, yeah. I don't know where that came from. And the third one, which is the specific climate change one, well, that was before. I mean, sitting in the Zendo watching pictures, that was pretty clear. But before that, I didn't have a means. I just had learning about climate change. Might have started with the Richard Heinberg talk, which made me depressed for 2 years. I was depressed for 2 years after realizing the amount of trouble we were in, because I had just this vague notion. And then sometime after that, I noticed that I had a vow to stop climate change. It was a vow to stop global warming then. And it had something to do with having grandchildren. I had learned this and then gone to visit the new baby, my only grandson. And I really, really felt it, how something has to change. And when I took permaculture is when I saw that it wasn't about technology, because we had the technology. That was 2006. It would have been a piece of cake to turn it around in 2006. And so I said to myself, okay, so what we need is consciousness change, so people will change how they live. Oh, look, I'm a priest. I'm in the right profession. So that was that, and those things lined up. And then, of course, like everybody, I have been watching greed, hate, and ignorance destroy everything that there is. Well, I mean, there will be life on Earth sometime in the future, but everything that we know and love, the things that we're attached to, the things that we're excited about, and they're not gone yet, but, you know. I'm giving long answers today. And I don't actually have a clock, so somebody else has to know how much time we have.
It's 10 after.
10 after.
10 after. That would mean we have another 5 minutes, if we want. Does anybody have a question or a comment?
I just have an announcement. I don't know how many people know Thich Nhat Hanh. You know, he's in his last days of his life. He was in Thailand in the month of September and August, and now he's back in Vietnam in his root temple north of Hue, and he's refusing medication now. And so he's this world as we know him now. So if you can light an incense for him.
Thank you for saying that. It's like our elders, Mary Oliver, Bernie Glassman,
Very
well,
fast
they are going. Some months ago, somebody wanted to use a quotation of mine for a calendar, a Buddhist, something. And they insisted on giving me a title. And I was like, you can't call me Roshi, blah, 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 blah. And so we negotiated something. And then I was talking to a friend who is also a priest. And she said, the older generation is passing. We have to step up. So I wrote them back and said they could call me Roshi. It's like, what? But yeah, it's like, it's time to step up. The kids are stepping up. They're doing a lot. But, those of us who are retired and who have all those years of learning and practice behind us, it's like, and again, what stepping out means is like, who knows? That's what you have to see for yourself.